The list of celebrity released spirit brands is ever growing, and Queen Bee, Beyonce, has recently released a Finnish rye whiskey that a lot of people are trashing online. Is it as bad as they say? If you want to find out, then stick around. So in the interest of full disclosure, the source of this bottle was I paid my own money for it full retail at a local store. Unfortunately, I am not on Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy's list of marketers to send bottles to. So the story behind this brand is Beyonce's great-grandfather, Davis Hogue, was supposedly a moonshiner. They also say that Beyonce's drink of choice has always been whiskey. And she partnered with Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton to bring this to the market. And they are partnered with master distiller Bill Lumsden, who is a 5-time world master distiller champion, won some award. And he is the master distiller for Glenmorangie, which is an amazing brand of scotch, obviously not American whiskey. But when you start to look at this whiskey, you're going to notice some marketing issues. So first off, Bill, the master distiller, claims that he's never tasted anything like this before, which isn't surprising because he doesn't work with this kind of whiskey. But it doesn't mean that it hasn't been done before, right? At the end of the day, this whiskey is just MGP rye whiskey. It is ubiquitous. Countless brands have bottled this whiskey before, and the only distinguishing characteristic is that it is finished in Pedro Jimenez PX sherry casks. And they are certainly not the first one to finish a rye whiskey in a PX sherry cask. In fact, they're not even the first ones to finish this MGP rye whiskey in a PX sherry cask. I believe that Sagamore Spirits did that not too long ago. But they also claim that the complexity of rye, and this one kind of made me laugh, is married with the elegance of malted barley. Now, all that means is that MGP's rye mash bill has some malted barley in it. And the fact that they thought that that was noteworthy and that they should put that on the label tells me that whoever was writing the marketing for this doesn't know very much about American spirits, because I'm not saying that there are no whiskeys that don't have malted barley in them, but there are almost no major producers that are producing a whiskey that has no malted barley in it, because it's a key component to bring in a compound that helps break down the complex carbohydrates so that there are simple sugars for the yeast to eat and turn into alcohol. So it was just weird that they decided to put that on the label. I couldn't actually find anything about Davis Hogue being a moonshiner. And I did try to find some evidence that Beyonce's always been a whiskey drinker, but if you go to Google and you search the words images of Beyonce drinking alcohol, you will find that there are 0 images of her drinking whiskey. Lots of images of cocktails, lots of images of expensive champagnes and wines, but no whiskey glasses. I did see a couple that were in snifters, but those are probably brandies or some other spirit category. You usually don't drink whiskey out of a snifter. So this looks to be kind of typical marketing that you see from the major producers, where they kind of make up this big backstory and try to make it sound sexier than it really is. Another thing to note is that in this label, whiskey is spelled without an E, right? So if you pay attention, almost all U.S. producers spell whiskey with an E between the K and the Y, and it is the normal spelling in Scotland to leave the E off. And so it seems to me that whoever was helping to put this brand together has more experience doing marketing and packaging for Scotch and spirits overseas than they actually do this type of whiskey. Otherwise, they probably would have included the E. It doesn't make sense to bottle an American whiskey and leave the E out unless you're going to tell a story why you did it. There are some producers that do it because they say that their whiskey is just as good as Scotch. And they wanted people to understand that, so they left the E off. But it would be odd to leave the E off and not explain why. So whoever put this package together is probably not very well informed about the kind of whiskey and the consumers that we're going to be marketed to about this whiskey. Now, let's talk about the bottle details. The distillery on the bottle is Davis Hogue Distilling Co. in Houston, Texas. Interesting thing about that, there is no Davis Hogue in Houston. There are rumors that Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy is looking to buy a property to build a distillery, or maybe to convert a property into a distillery. But as of right now, they don't have any presence there. And I found something out that was very interesting. So you can go to Google and type in the words COLA, which is an acronym for Certificate of Label Approval. And you can say search COLA approvals on Google. And the TTB website will come up, and you can pull up a search tool and type in the name of a brand, and you can search. And when I searched this brand, I saw that they have 2 colas that are approved. And on there, it says who the distillery is that's going to be bottling this whiskey. And lo and behold, this whiskey is bottled at the same distillery as my brand, the Prideful Goat, right there in Houston, Texas, which is Giant Texas Distillers. You can go and check out the cola yourself. For the record, that information was not shared with me by anybody at the distillery. I am certain that they have an NDA and they wouldn't be allowed to say that, but I found it on my own on the cola website. Interestingly enough, the second cola is for Still Austin in Austin, Texas, which is another brand that I'm a huge fan of. And apparently they got part of the bottling contract with Moet Hennessy to bottle this. The SKU is called SIRDAVIS Rye Whiskey. That's very significant because their cola, as you can see, is registered under Class 142. The age on this whiskey is non-age stated, but that Class 142 is going to come into play as we try and figure out what the actual age of this whiskey is. So, as you can see, I filed a cola for a rye whiskey that was produced at the same distillery as this whiskey, which is MGP in Indiana. And I poured that out into rum barrels and let it age in the rum barrels in the same fashion that they poured this whiskey out of the original rye barrel into a PX sherry cask. And when I submitted for my cola, my attorney submitted us in Class 102. Now, the difference between Class 102 and Class 142, they're both rye whiskey classes, but Class 102 is for straight rye whiskey. And Class 142 is just for the general class of rye whiskey. And so that might give us some indications of what is actually in this bottle. If they don't qualify for a straight, then that would generally mean that it was rye whiskey, but it was disqualified to be called straight rye whiskey because it was under 2 years old. And that would be a very, very young rye whiskey from MGP. Their aging environment is very gentle, and there's almost no wood interaction in the first couple of years that those barrels are in those warehouses. But another significant thing is that I've searched all over, and you cannot find an age statement for this whiskey. And in the United States, when you bottle a whiskey, it has to be at least 4 years old, or you have to put an age statement somewhere on the bottle so that the consumer understands that they're buying a younger product. The fact that there is no age statement and the fact that it's not a straight might give us an idea of what's going on with the age of this whiskey. So either LVMH filed in the wrong class, right? So maybe they should have filed in 102, but they filed in 142. But they're a huge conglomerate that has attorneys and things that do this, and that would shock me. So I don't think that's the case. There is a chance that they submitted their cola without a age statement on there, purposely breaking the law, because that does happen. Sometimes people submit colas, they leave something off. I don't think that the Moet Hennessy people, their attorneys, don't know about the 4-year age statement law in the United States, so I couldn't imagine that would be an accident. But there is a scenario where they put the whiskey in Class 142 because it didn't reach the 4-year mark as a straight bourbon. Therefore, they couldn't say that it was straight bourbon without putting an age statement. But they did make it over 4 years after they put it in the PX sherry cask. And so I think that's the most likely scenario, that this whiskey maybe could have qualified for a straight bourbon category, but they would have had to put an age statement, which they knew would kill the value of the brand. And so what they decided to do was to take this whiskey that was somewhere between 0 and 4 years old and age it for long enough in the PX sherry cask to get it above that 4 years so they could leave the age statement off. So that's the most likely scenario. We're dealing with the whiskey that it hit 4 years old with the PX sherry cask finishing, but it did not hit 4 years old as a straight rye whiskey. Otherwise, it probably would have gone into that category. The proof on this one is 88 proof, which is a good proof if your ideal purchaser of the whiskey is somebody who's not used to drinking the high proof monster whiskeys that most of us that are, heavily involved in the whiskey enthusiast world like to drink. The SRP on this one is a whopping $89.99. I had to go look again, and I looked it up in my local Total Wine, and that is what it is on the shelf for today. The size of the bottle is 750 ml in the United States, but they do make a 700 ml version that's being sold overseas. So, without further ado, let's taste this bad boy and see what it tastes like. On the nose, you are detecting that PX sherry cask. There is a lot of dried fruit on the nose. I'm going in the direction of probably a raisin, which you would expect from a PX sherry. Let's see what it tastes like. Compared to most MGP ryes, this is pretty light, but a lot of the MGP ryes that I'm buying and drinking, they're not proofing them down to 88 proof. It does have that classic MGP rye flavor, clove, nutmeg, cinnamon, and you are getting a good bit of the dried fruit notes of raisin and maybe even like a dried cherry, something that's a little bit more of a sharper flavor. All in all, it's not a bad flavor. So how would I rate this whiskey on a 100-point scale? I'm going to give this one about a 75. It's certainly not a failing grade, but this one's not blowing me away. I suspect at a higher proof, maybe even at cask strength, we could have gotten up there. I think we could have gotten up there in the mid 80s, maybe high 80s on this one. It's the base whiskey itself is not bad. But then comes the question, if the flavor's okay, is it a buy or pass at SRP? And unfortunately, I'm going to have to rate this one a strong pass. Now, I will say, even though I'm not recommending that anybody buy this bottle, that anyone saying that this whiskey actually tastes bad on the palate is probably biased because it's a celebrity brand or they're not a fan of Beyonce. When you really understand the industry, brands like High West, Willet, Smoke Wagon, Nulu, Barrel Craft Spirits, The Prideful Goat, Penelope, Pinhook, OKI, Boone County, Old Soul, Widow Jane, Smooth Ambler, Old Elk, and Whistle Pig, and many others have all bottled this same whiskey, and the public have loved it. So when somebody comes along and goes, this whiskey tastes bad, it's like, well, you didn't think it tasted bad when it was in somebody else's bottle and wasn't associated with a celebrity. So I don't think that you could say that it tastes bad. You could complain about the proof. You could say that it's light. But at the end of the day, the designers of this brand just put a bunch of fine-sounding things together that don't really make sense. You've got a Scotch distiller that's won all these awards, that's somehow working on a finished American rye whiskey. You've got Beyonce, who there's really no evidence that she knows anything about whiskey. You've got them spelling whiskey like it was from Scotland because everybody working on it from Scotland, but they don't even understand American whiskey, so it's spelled with no E. You have questions like, why are they saying that there's never been anything like this before? The lack of age statement probably indicates that this is a whiskey that was certainly under 4 years old whenever they started to finish it. And if that's the case, at best, this whiskey should cost $30 to $40 at best. So at the end of the day, the whiskey tastes fine. It's just overpriced for what it is. But we have to understand that this whiskey was not made for us. The buyers of this whiskey are buying it because Beyonce wants them to. And they don't know or don't care that it is overpriced for what it is. It's a beautiful Art Deco bottle. People see this, they associate luxury with Beyonce. They want a piece of that luxury, and they're going to go out and they're going to buy this bottle. And when they taste it, it'll probably taste just fine to them because the underlying whiskey is fine and it's a low proof and it won't offend that category of buyer. But for my average viewer, this is probably going to be a strong pass. You'd be better off spending your money someplace else. So, as always, we're going to do a giveaway. And on this one, we're going to give away 2 ounce samples. We normally give away 1 ounce samples. And we're going to have 5 winners. And all you have to do to enter to win is like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, which will notify you of future content pieces, but also future giveaways because we give something away in every video. And of course, go down below the video player, and in the video description, you will be able to click on a web form that says free giveaway. Give us your basic contact information. We'll run a randomizer, post the results publicly, and post on YouTube for accountability. Reach out to the winners, get your address, and ship your samples absolutely for free. And if you like this content and you want to support the channel, you can check out our Patreon. Patreon has all different levels of membership for whatever budget you're working with. And there are a lot of benefits. It's not just a one-way street. We do bonus content and curated whiskey trips and single barrel selections. And I invite you to go out on picks, and we do virtual bottle shares and all kinds of great things. But you also get the satisfaction knowing that you support the channel and its mission, which if you're unfamiliar with what we do, stick around because I'm going to tell you. We also have merch at bourbonrealtalk.com. We have really amazing things if you're a whiskey lover, including high proof spirits tasting glasses that are custom designed for higher proof American spirits. We have whiskey aroma kits so that you can develop your palate and learn how to break down whiskeys. We've got bottle carrying bags and everything in between, so go check that out. And last but not least, I am a residential real estate agent and I operate in the Dallas and Houston metro areas. So if you need to buy or sell in either of those markets, I'd love for you to reach out to me and interview me. And if we end up closing a deal, I do give epic bottles as closing gifts. And you can find links for all 3 ways to support the channel in the video description below, right above the free giveaway link. So I promised you that if you were unfamiliar with the channel, I'd tell you what we're all about. And that is, we're about using whiskey as a catalyst to bring people together to create community and connection. And that's something that's important to me because I lost my brother to suicide. He had lost a lot of those connections in his life. And I was trying to find a way to give back to others and help others avoid that end. And I saw how whiskey was bringing people together. And so I thought maybe if I could get you connected to whiskey, the whiskey would do the rest of the job and get you connected to others. In that effort, though, we did need to have a forum, and when you research forums, you will find that there is some negativity out there online. We call them whiskey trolls, and they say hateful things to strangers. So we created our own forum called Bourbon Real Talk Community, which is a free Facebook-based whiskey forum. You can go join right now. Lots of great things going on in there. We coordinate fundraisers, but there's a lot of community and people sharing and people coordinating local get-togethers and all that stuff. And all of that is absolutely for free. And we did parlay that into our own nonprofit called Live Stay Project, which is a suicide prevention and intervention nonprofit. And all of that is administered inside of the Bourbon Real Talk realm of supporters, and even our whole board of directors is from there. So lots of good things going on with the community. But not only did we decide to start the community because of the trolls, but the trolls taught me another very important lesson, and that is if they can hate strangers online, I can love strangers online. And that's why I end every episode the same way, and that's this. If you woke up this morning and you're unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you. And I'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk.